The fluid in your skull is supposed to protect your brain, cushioning it from the world's sharp edges. For Daniel Gray, it became a prison. Every sound in his hospital room, the hum of the fluorescent lights, the distant beep of a monitor, felt amplified, hammering directly against the raw tissue of his mind. A metallic taste, like licking a battery, flooded his mouth without warning. Then came the pressure, a deep, sickening swell inside his head, as if his thoughts were too big for the bone that contained them. He couldn't tell the nurses about the whispers. They weren't in the room. They were in the fluid, a susurrus of dead languages and forgotten names that rose and fell with the pounding in his temples. Daniel Gray was drowning on dry land, and the thing he was drowning in was himself. For 7 long years, he consumed nothing. No food, no water. His body rebelled against every known medical law because Daniel survived on something far more horrifying. He sustained himself by drinking his own spinal fluid. This is what happens when the mind wages war on the body and wins. Archival-style footage. A sunny park in Austin, Texas. A younger, healthy Daniel laughs with his wife, Emma. They were the picture of health, of a future promised. But beneath that Texas sun, a shadow was already taking root. To understand the end, you must witness the beginning. Daniel Gray was a structural engineer from Austin, a man who built things to endure. His mind was logical, his wife Emma loving, his life anchored to solid ground. They looked happy, they looked normal. But in 2014, the foundation cracked. The first signs were subtle, almost imperceptible. A profound loss of appetite was the initial whisper of decay. It wasn't just food he was rejecting, it was the warmth of life itself. A metallic tang seeped into every morsel Daniel consumed. A persistent, chemical bitterness that clung to his tongue. Doctors dismissed it first as anxiety, then a stomach bug, finally diagnosing a severe food intolerance. But for Daniel, each meal transformed into a slow, visceral act of torture. His own body, his very mind, began to violently reject the fundamental idea of sustenance itself. It was like watching him develop an allergy to existence itself. He'd try to eat, and his throat would just seize shut. Panic attacks, vomiting. His body was rejecting the very act of being alive. We saw specialists all over the state, but none could name this slow, consuming dread. No one could explain it. The weight simply dissolved from his body. Daniel was diagnosed with severe avoidant/restrictive food intake disorder, a psychological condition so extreme, his own brain was screaming that all food was poison. But his case was about to slip into uncharted medical territory. The air in the hospital room grew heavy with the sterile scent of antiseptic and something else. Something metallic, like old blood. After 18 agonizing months, Daniel's body rejected everything. Not water, not even the nutrient shakes pumped through a tube. His system had shut down, a prison locking him inside his own flesh. The focus shifted from gut to brain, from consumption to the very fluid bathing his nerves. His body violently rejected everything. He became a spectral presence in a Houston long-term care facility, sustained only by liquid nutrition. Even this artificial lifeline began to falter, the metallic scent of blood and antiseptic hanging thick in the air. His veins, one by one, gave out, leaving him trapped in a failing shell. The infection deepened, its tendrils spreading through Daniel's weakened body. Medicine had exhausted every option, leaving only sterile silence in its wake. Daniel was starving to death in that sterile bed, the scent of antiseptic now mingling with something metallic and sour. His breath hitched as the machine's rhythmic beeping began to falter. Dr. Archer, a stern-faced man in his 50s wearing a lab coat, chose his next words with deliberate care. From a purely medical standpoint, his case defied all established biological laws. The human body cannot endure more than a handful of days without water. Yet, he survived. This was the first of many impossible facts that would unravel our understanding of reality. Weeks without sustenance had pushed Daniel beyond his limits. His body was a husk, parched, starved, and trembling with exhaustion. Yet, against all reason, his mind remained unnervingly sharp. He was fully awake, coherent, and trapped in a waking nightmare. Nothing about Daniel's condition followed any medical logic. Then, in a voice frayed with desperation, he made a claim to his neurologist, Dr. Archer, that defied all biological sense. He said he didn't feel thirsty. The words hung in the sterile air, a simple statement that carried the weight of something profoundly, terrifyingly wrong. He described an unsettling, cooling relief in his head and spine during each lumbar puncture to check for infection. It's the only thing that feels hydrating, like my brain is drinking it. Dr. Archer dismissed it as delirium, the metallic tang of the hospital air clinging to his senses, until the lab results arrived, their crisp paper whispering a terrible truth. Daniel's cerebrospinal fluid, the clear liquid cushioning the brain and spine, was unnaturally rich in electrolytes and nutrients. His body, in a final, desperate act to preserve the mind, was cannibalizing itself, concentrating the salvageable into this internal reservoir. A horrific, self-sustaining loop had taken hold. His body was consuming itself to produce the compound. His mind became fixated on it as the only source of sustenance. A primal dread of the inevitable, final depletion took hold. A psychological delusion had manifested a terrifying physiological adaptation, unlike anything we'd ever witnessed. The sterile air in the observation chamber grew thick with the scent of ozone and the metallic tang of fear. Trapped with no escape, Dr. Archer's voice, a low rasp against the oppressive quiet, proposed a final, desperate protocol. A primal dread, cold and damp, settled over the team as they listened, each breath a shallow, conscious effort. They would regularly draw small amounts of Daniel's cerebrospinal fluid through lumbar puncture and let him consume it. Emma's voice breaks, thick with unshed tears. They came to me for consent. My husband was going to drink. That, a profound, gut-wrenching dread settles in the space between her words. I signed the form. I just wanted my husband to live. A metallic scent filled the air, like ozone before a storm, as the ink seemed to writhe on the page. The room's temperature plummeted, my breath hitching as a cold, damp presence pressed in from all sides. From somewhere beyond the walls came a faint scratching, like claws on old wood, and the whisper of something ancient stirring. I realized too late what I'd truly awakened in my desperation. A single, high-pitched note sustained, thin and sharp as a surgical scalpel. Daniel sat in a stark white room, the air thick with the scent of antiseptic and his own cold sweat. A nurse silently prepared a syringe, the clear liquid within catching the light. He watched, his face a mask of deep shame, yet his entire body tensed with a raw, desperate craving. The first time was the most clinical, the most horrifying moment. Daniel's hand shook as he drew the fluid into a sterile container, the viscous liquid clinging to the glass. He raised the cup to his lips, the air thick with the scent of ozone and something metallic. A shallow gasp, then the swallow. The liquid was cold and oily as it slid down his throat, and it worked. Daniel's frail voice is measured, but there's a haunted quality to it. He described the taste as clean, like frigid mineral water from a deep well. The relief it brought was immediate, washing over him in a single, shocking wave. But in that instant of pure clarity, a new, more profound dread began to take root. The pain wasn't in my stomach, but deep within my skull. The crushing headache of dehydration would recede for a few merciful hours. In those moments of false relief, the knowing settled in my bones, cold and absolute. I knew the thing visiting me was monstrous. I knew precisely what it was, but my mind screamed it was life. For 7 years, this was his reality, a phantom sustained by his own closed-loop system. He became a living paradox, a medical ghost. The procedure had spared him immediate death, but he was now its prisoner, wasting away, his bones grown brittle, his muscles atrophied. Yet his mind remained painfully, excruciatingly alert. He was like a ship consuming its own timbers to feed the furnace, slowly devouring itself from within to maintain a flicker of life. Dr. Archer would later describe their role with grim clarity. We were just collecting the ashes. The air in the ward carried the metallic tang of ozone and decay, a scent that clung to the back of the throat. He was alive, but this wasn't living. It was a slow, sanctioned suicide. The real climax wasn't a moment, but a creeping realization over those 7 years. The horror wasn't just the act, it was the acceptance. The medical staff, even Daniel's own sister Emma, grew numb to the unthinkable routine. The psychological intervention was a slow dismantling of the fortress of fear built in Daniel's mind. No miracle cure broke the cycle, only years of agonizing therapeutic work. In the present day, Daniel sits with Emma in a sunlit garden, sipping water, a simple, profound victory. It began with a single drop of water on his lips, then a sip, a process more grueling than any physical therapy. A metallic tang of fear mixed with the sterile scent of the room. Daniel: learning to eat again was harder than learning not to. My body had forgotten its own rhythm, while my mind screamed in silent terror. The spinal fluid wasn't just a substance, it was a prison, a sanctuary of pure, exquisite horror, a cage that was both safe and utterly monstrous. Today, Daniel Gray eats, he drinks water. He is, by all standard definitions, recovering. But the story doesn't end with a happy sunset. The camera lingers on Daniel's face, his gaze holding a profound, unnerving awareness. Because Daniel survived the unsurvivable, discovering a fount of life within his own flesh when the external world turned toxic. So the question now haunts his doctors, torments Emma, and gnaws at Daniel himself. When your own consciousness can warp your fundamental biology to such a terrifying extent, what are the true boundaries of human endurance? And what part of us must be sacrificed for the rest to endure? The metallic scent of antiseptic hung in the air, cold and clinical. A profound stillness settled over the room, broken only by the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Then, one final, distinct drip echoed through the sterile silence.
If the veil stirred, subscribe and meet the next encounter.